Hi, and welcome to Talk to Ruth. Today's guest, we will be talking about homelessness, advocacy, and how we can contribute to our community in helping homelessness out. Today's guest is Richard Clark. Hi, Richard. How are
Hi,
you?
Ruth. Doing really well. How are you?
Good, good. I met you at the Downtown Center for Women.
Yeah, Downtown Women's Center.
It's actually a transitional women's center that help women that were homeless and they're in transitioning to the workforce, careers, programs, and they also receive shelters in the mission or the women's center.
Downtown Women's Center. I don't work for them, but they were like a collaborative partner of ours. Downtown Women's Center provides a lot of services, from basic things like providing breakfast and lunch to case management services. They can get the women into treatment programs. They have an internship program. They have their own housing, which takes some time. Their case management services do a lot too. They can get their cases into public housing, Section 8, stuff like that. There's a lot of assistance in a lot of different programs.
We actually had a tea right there on the coffee shop right there next to Downtown Women's Center, right?
Yes, yeah.
I actually volunteered. The reason why I was there is that I volunteered for they have a little boutique there, and I modeled for their clothing line. So they have clothes in their boutique that they wanted me to do, curvaceous modeling. So I said, sure, why not? So I met wonderful women there. I met you there. We discussed about what you do and what was your take in the homeless. I guess there's programs there. And you had mentioned to me that you work for a university and you're doing a research study on the homeless. You were actually on ground zero, Skid Row. So you were walking the walk, talking the talk, and just being there in the front line of every homeless person in Skid Row.
Yeah, we did a lot of outreach in the community.
Can you tell me a little bit what you did?
Yeah, so I was a research coordinator essentially I can't say what university I worked for, and I can't really say too much in detail about the study because of legality and privacy, stuff like that. But
Understood.
Essentially, the purpose of the study was to get people treatment for hepatitis C, which is a virus. It's a virus that attacks the liver. It's usually transmitted via blood.
Mm-hmm.
It can be also transmitted sexually. So very common methods of transmission are reusing needles that somebody else has used that is infected with the virus.
Mm-hmm.
Also, people can transmit it sexually. It can also transmit with dirty razors and things like that, reusing somebody else's razor. But it's a virus that attacks your liver. It causes scarring, very similar to the way an alcoholic will eventually get liver scarring, cirrhosis.
Yeah.
And it will eventually kill. They call it the silent killer.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was quite an experience. I worked on that study almost since its inception. We did a lot of outreach in the community in Skid Row, on the street, at collaborative partners like Downtown Women's Center, a lot of reentry programs, that was an interesting experience. Good relationships that we built with clinics surrounding Skid Row to get people the services that they needed. Also with different missions. I had an office inside one of the missions on Skid Row that we operated out of. The purpose of the study was not to test anything new. Like, we weren't testing any new drugs or anything like that. It was all FDA approved treatments. But the model of the treatment was being tested. Yeah. So the idea of the study was to compare one treatment model, which is the traditional treatment model. So let's say that a person has hepatitis C. We use direct acting antiviral drugs to combat the infection. Such as Mavorette or Epclusa or Harvoni. Different manufacturers make these. They're very, very expensive if you pay for them in private pay, but through government programs, you can get them for free. So the traditional treatment model would be basically they're diagnosed, cleared for treatment. Pharmacy gives them a box of medications, says, hey, take one a day or whatever it may be, and send them on their way. And then the idea of the study was to compare a different treatment model, which was a model in which we were much more involved in the day-to-day process of delivering medication to the person, asking them how they were doing, administering questionnaires, checking on side effects, things like that, like a much more one-to-one relationship.
So you were acting as a doctor with boundaries?
Oh, like Doctors Without Borders?
Yes, without borders.
Yeah, it was
kind
of similar to Doctors Without Borders, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm not a doctor.
Yes.
I just collect data at the end of the day, right?
Were you fully clothed in your uniform and you would go out there?
So surprisingly, that's an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
You actually don't, when you do outreach in a community like Skid Row, the idea is you really don't want to dress even semi-formally or business casual. You want to dress basically like I'm dressed right now.
Yes.
Like you want to be as casual as possible. I would very often have the backwards hat on because you don't want it to be off-putting.
Or to bring attention to in a negative way?
In a negative, yeah, exactly. So you don't want it to be off-putting. You want to be able to connect with people. And one of the best ways is by not putting on airs, I guess you could say.
So you didn't put up a front and say,
no.
this.
Okay. At the end of the day, I'm there to help, and I need to be able to connect with people to be able to help them.
So what got you into this? I mean, how did it start? Did you just say, okay, one day I wish to help. This is my passion. I want to do a missionary work. I want to reach out to these people so I can help. Was it in you all the time? Or you just said, okay, there's a program out there. I'm going to take advantage and go forward.
The way I got into it was I knew somebody that worked at an organization that provides substance abuse treatment services.
Okay.
Manager at an organization called Health Right 360. And she knew my skill set and my work ethic, and we knew each other very well personally.
Yes.
And she heard through the grapevine that they needed somebody for this position, and she immediately thought, I got the perfect person. Yeah. So
the opportunity came.
The opportunity came.
And you just grasped it and said, you know what, I want to do this.
Yep.
So do you feel it's a passion in you by wanting to help the unfortunate or the people out there struggling?
I do want to help. Wow. Definitely. And we'll talk about this later in the show.
Yes.
There's another whole thing that I've developed trying to help people. But yeah, I definitely want to help. But I also am a firm believer in there is a bright line, as they say, where you can help people, but you can't carry them. Okay. Like you have to.
You can't, like we said, don't hold their hand.
Right? Yeah. Right? You can't hold their hand through every step of the process. Okay. Don't let them absolve themselves of responsibility for their own lives.
We had mentioned the other day that about programs. There's so many programs out there. And I said, well, what if they don't have a phone? Or what if they don't have transportation? And you had mentioned they could just hop on a bus, ask, and they can get that help if they wanted that help.
There are a lot of programs out there.
So do you feel that the homeless people want the help? They don't want the help? Or do you feel that they just don't want to be in authority-based shelter where they have these rules and regulations?
So like to speak to homelessness in general, especially here in Los Angeles, yes, where it's everywhere, literally everywhere.
Yeah.
Homelessness is like, there are so many influencing factors when it comes to homelessness. And the way that a lot of politicians like to speak to homelessness, and the way that a lot of, I guess you could say, armchair academics like to speak to homelessness is as if it's something that you can erase, as if it's a problem that you can magically solve. But in my experience, yes, which I went to a lot of different places. I did outreach in the street, talked to a lot of homeless. I got a very broad spectrum idea of the reasons, the causation for homelessness, influencing factors, you cannot solve homelessness. There is no solution. If there was a solution for homelessness, we would have come up with it a long time before we came along.
Yeah.
People have been homeless since the dawn of time, since
before
agrarian
Christ.
culture, since before Christ, there have been homeless, right? There's no solution. There are impacts that you can make. There is a better way to do it and a worse way to do it, but there's no solution. Because at the end of the day, like right now, the biggest influencing factors for homelessness are most obviously addiction, substance abuse, right? Alcoholism, whatever, just call it substance abuse problems.
Yeah.
And mental illness.
Yes.
Biggest influencing factors. These two factors primarily support each other. One makes the other worse. Somebody has, it's a co-occurring disorder or what they call dual diagnosis.
Yeah.
Someone has any kind of mental issues, and then they choose to use drugs, especially the drugs that are on the streets right now.
Yeah.
It will make those problems worse. And even somebody who doesn't have mental health issues, if they use the drugs that are on the streets right now, it will cause mental issues. Yeah. I've met people like that.
So we're saying it's a general, it's almost like a stigma that homelessness can be solved today if we put them into housing. We're going to build 3,000 or 300,000, 365 days, 30,000 beds in those period amount of time. But the serious issue is you can stick somebody into the facility, but will they abide by the rules? Because what you're saying is dual diagnosis. And in order to mask it, we got to go to the direct problem, which is mental health and addiction.
Yep.
So they're not going to be as normal per se if you stick them into a home or a facility where they have 30,000 beds, because they're not going to know how to function. So in order for them to build that, you have to get them services for those areas of need.
Yeah, what
right?
It really comes down to a lot of the time, and that's besides the fact that the current state of especially methamphetamine on the streets is causing a humongous uptick in paranoid schizophrenia symptomology. Like it's insane, right? The drugs are bad, and now they're worse than they ever have been. But besides that,
to deal with the issue first.
Yeah. So besides that, the thing is, you have to realize a lot of people who are on the streets, and this is in a vacuum, besides mental health, besides drug addiction. It's an accountability thing. That's the best word to speak to the issue, is accountability. When you build there's tiny home villages, there are shelters, there are lots of different programs that are out there, right? And they exist. That's the thing. You build these places, and it's great. They work. They really do work, because there are some people that don't have any issues, that don't have any mental health, that can handle accountability. They're just in a bad spot. I've seen it many times, especially with families, right? Families like parents with children, things like that. They are capable of success. They just hit like a bump in the road, and it is what it is. They can use these programs, and they're very beneficial. You have a lot of people that, the classic example you've all seen is like a giant tent camp with bike frames surrounding it, 200 stolen bike frames. And they're out there at 3:30 in the morning wrenching on bikes. Somebody like that, a lot of the time, cannot handle the accountability that comes with utilizing programs.
You're right.
Because they want to be able to get up and leave whenever they want. They want to be able to come back whenever they want. They want to be able to hang out with whoever they want, use drugs 24 hours a day. They want to be able to crime. And when you move somebody into a tiny home village, they have accountability. They have to probably clean bathrooms. They have case management services. They have curfews, and they can't bring 200 stolen bikes into the tiny home village and wrench on them at 3:30 in the morning. Exactly. And that's the thing, is what it comes down to with that is you can never completely clear the streets unless you pass something like vagrancy laws, which is really not a good idea.
You had mentioned something about there's a certain drug that you can give a person when they're actually experiencing overdose symptoms. Can they do it to most of these people out on Skid Row if you see that they're really bad in their addiction?
Well, that's with opiates. So opiates are drugs like classically heroin, painkillers like Norco, OxyContin, oxycodone, and then the big menace that's out now, which is fentanyl. Yeah. These are opiates, classic opiates, right? Fentanyl, I'm sure everybody listening to this has heard of fentanyl. Everybody knows how evil it is right now.
So can they distribute that type of medication to these people?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is a product called Narcan. Narcan reverses opioid overdose, but Narcan is only good for overdose. If you are a chronic user, it's not going to help you wean yourself off the drug. They have other drugs for that. There's a drug called Suboxone. There's what's the classic one? It's not morphine. It's methadone is a treatment for opiate addiction. Opiate addiction is horrible. Yeah. It's one of the worst things. It's the gold standard for withdrawal. If you try to stop cold turkey, it's exceedingly difficult to stop using opiates once someone has started.
So just don't start. Don't even get influenced by that because you know the outcome. You see it in the streets.
It's true.
Why would you even want to chance it, even to try it out?
Yeah.
And a lot of these youngsters are like, oh, nothing's going to happen. But in reality, that one time will become addiction.
It can.
That's a choice that you will make for the rest of your life. It's good. There's a negative outcome in it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we do drugs a disservice by simply saying drugs are bad or don't do drugs, because you don't really grasp the whole gravity of like what that means. Not only, I mean, for example, a 15-year-old girl, something like that, died in a bathroom at Hollywood High from eating fake pressed pharmaceutical pills that were actually fentanyl and not real pharmaceutical pills. So not only because of fentanyl now can you just die the first time you ever do a drug, but you're signing on to potentially destroying every single facet of your life by doing drugs. And that's something that
it's just we have to there's home. A lot of fake pills out there that look so similar to candy. I mean, exactly.
Well,
like the gummy bears and these fentanyl pills that look like Skittles.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Those pills, those are imitations of a tablet that's produced by a company called Mallinckrodt, called a 30 milligram. I think it's a oxycodone. And traditionally they were a light blue color and they have very specific markings on them. And then now the cartels in their infinite wisdom are creating all these different color ones to make it clear that they're obviously knockoff pills, but in that thing, and now it looks like a bag of Skittles. So you have that whole drug scare. Oh, it's Skittles. They're trying to scare you. They're trying to give Skittles to your kids. But the fact is, like, anybody with these pills is going to know what they are, because they're obviously not Skittles. They have markings on them that make it clear that they're not candy, and they're definitely not sweet.
I see, when I see a need, I try to fill the need as much as possible. So if I see, I'm kind of an advocate. If I see a homeless person and I see that they're struggling or they're on something, I will be the person to call this 1-800 number to get them help. And you keep calling, you keep putting this report out there, hoping that they're going to help this individual. And you still see them out there. And the reason being that they're still out there is because, like you said, they're not ready for authority.
Some people don't want the help.
And my heart breaks out for they're young kids. Sometimes. They're like in the 20s. And my heart breaks out for them. I said, what could I do? I don't have money. You mentioned don't give them the money.
Do not give them money.
And the reason being?
Because they're going to spend it on drugs.
On drugs.
Straight up.
What could I do for you? What did you tell the homeless people when you were out there?
In the capacity of my job, I had
You would ask
like
them, how are you?
links. Well,
Maybe
yeah, I
like,
would say, do you need help? Like, we're
Yeah.
obviously checking them to see if they're infected with hepatitis C.
Yeah.
But then we also ask them, like, do you need housing? Do you want assistance?
Oh, that's wonderful.
I screened over 1,000 people for hepatitis C in 2 years. One person took me up on my offer to get them a bed.
1 out of 1,000.
One.
And all these people, 1,000 people that you spoke to, you actually said, hey, you need help. Do you want a bed?
Yeah.
And they all rejected it. What was the reason?
Who knows? I don't. That's not the kind of question that you ask.
Yeah.
You know, if they want help, you help them.
Yeah.
And there were some people that said, "Oh yeah." There were a lot of people that said, "Yes, I will take that help, or I'll take a bed." But when you actually go through the motions, they wouldn't go through.
See, homelessness is not sometimes like, well, the majority is they come from another state.
A lot of people do.
Feel that it's a better life here. They settle in to find out, okay, I don't have anything. I don't know anybody. And they end up in the street. That's one of the homeless issue. Or a homeless person could be teenagers just running away.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Or
sometimes
it could be a possibility that you lose your house or you can't pay rent anymore because you lost your job. So homelessness is not all the same.
No, it's not.
It's different types of situations that happen to them in their lives, and how do they overcome? Like you said, there is programs out there, and they can seek help.
Yes.
They just gotta search. We have our technology that we can just search anything on Google, and we'll find our answer. If you can't, you just got to keep doing it over and over in a constant, way, and then you will find these numbers. Yeah. There's these numbers that I had found when I did this show on mental health and mental illness. I have all those numbers that I had them. Even the cops didn't have the numbers that I had. And that was shocking because the PET team is a team that goes out there when there is a crisis. At that very moment. You don't just go out there and think that person is normal, because they're not. They're facing something in that very moment in time. So I would suggest that they go out there and have that team evaluate them, maybe put them in a 5150 for the time being until you find out what happened to this person.
So they do that. And in Skid Row, the firefighters at the Skid Row station work really, really hard.
Yeah.
They definitely earn their pay. Yeah. Your tax dollars are going to something good right there.
Good.
But the fact is, unless somebody is a threat to themselves or others, you can't 5150 them.
Yeah.
You have to be homicidal or suicidal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's mental illness at the end of the day. It's just something that, humans, it's part of us. It's a part of humanity. It is what it is. Yeah. So, and it's an interesting thing that you just said about the services, right? Recently, it's always been in LA, but homelessness is a popular topic, especially for politicians.
Exactly.
And it's an interesting thing. You hear a lot of politicians say, recently, I don't want to speak to politics too much, so I'm not going to say names, but there was one real estate developer / politician that wanted to transform the old Sears building in Boyle Heights into a 1 million bed homeless fortress, right? And there's another one that's running right now, or whatever, I don't know. His policy is 30,000 beds in 300 days or 360 days or something like that. And everybody speaks to this thing. But the funny thing is, okay, you have to look at those statements, which sound really great on the surface, right? And you have to take a step back and realize that there is an assumption being made when you make that statement. Yeah. And the assumption is, oh, we don't have enough beds. But then you have to ask the question, is that assumption correct? Okay. And
do you feel that they should convert this Sears building into oasis, shelter, whatever
I mean, the thing is,
program it
do
is.
you need it? Like, we make this assumption by making that statement, like, and everybody just takes it as a given. Like, oh, that must mean we need these beds, right? That means that there's not enough beds. But then if you call the shelters and ask, there are beds.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being used because accountability,
Yes.
because people are experiencing mental health issues or drug issues.
Yeah.
There are organizations that exist for the sole purpose of reducing the harm of drug use. There are organizations that exist for the sole purpose of giving free mental health treatment to those that need it, but they're underutilized because a lot of people that are experiencing mental health issues, they won't
volunteer themselves to.
They won't. Even if you refer them. That was part of what I did too. Is I said, hey, do you need mental health services? Because we have links with these organizations, and sometimes we'd get, oh yeah, sure. And
how can somebody get a hold of you, or maybe the program that you were in, get these services? Do they have to dial a number? Do they have to go on a certain website that you're aware of?
If someone needs help, ask for help. And then if someone offers you help, use the help. Don't let it lapse. That's what it comes down to. People say that a lot of these case managers are overworked and so on and so forth. But in my experience, you have to realize that these case managers or any type of social services organization, be it, MSW, anything, psychs, psychiatrists, whatever, anybody, just even coordinators and interns that work at these places. They talk to a lot of people. And then what happens is the people that they talk to, the people that are supposed to be utilizing these services, they just don't show up. They don't call. They forget. They postpone. They just ignore appointments. It happens every single day. I set so many appointments for people that came up positive or what they call reactive for hepatitis C quick tests.
Never showed up.
If I set 5 appointments and one person showed up, that was a win for the week. Like, I'd say maybe 10% actually made their appointments.
Wow. So in other words, these people that are out there, just street by street by street, there is really no solution. Is that what you're saying, or your experience tells you to, that there cannot be, I don't know if they say they sweep the streets, but where do they go? Do you think there is a solution? What, in your mind, or how do you think they can help these homeless people out of the streets?
You can make an impact, but let me ask you something. When you say the word solution, what does that mean?
Well, for me, I would first focus and target on the mental health and addiction issues first. Either they be placed to a facility. I'm not saying by force, but it should be mandatory that these people can get help and maybe come out of that a trip or whatever they are in at that moment. And when they're out of that trip, make sure that they get the help that they need first, to target that first. Then if they're willing to change and be placed in a facility, there's halfway houses that are 6 months that can help these people. And if they're willing to change, they will change, and they can change. I've actually known a person that was out in the streets, young boy, for so long. I could not believe that this child was not a bad child, grew up very well and strong. And for him to see him with no shoes, no clothes, maybe half shoes here, half talking very, very strange, because they were on
methamphetamine,
meth,
undoubtedly.
And apparently it was in the Victorville area, because there's not much to do in Victorville or Apple Valley out there. So apparently somebody seen him coming down from the trip, and I guess it was a religious person came up to him, outreach, and brought him and said, hey, do you need help? I can help you. I can clothe you. I can house you. I can feed you if you do this program. So he was willing to accept the offer. He went into this facility. Nobody knew where he was. It's like a disappearance, missing persons for 6 months, gone. His own mom didn't even know where he was at. Everybody thought the worst possible.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Where's this kid?
Yep.
They called jails. They called hospitals. They called morgues.
Yeah.
They've been searching for this youngster out in the street. Maybe he's buried somewhere. But sure enough, this was a good outreach that happened to this child, and he was able to come out of it successful.
Yeah.
Stayed there for 6 months, rehabilitated himself, works for this facility, and now he's clean.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
So it could happen.
Yeah, there are cases where people do come out of it, and I wish it was more common. Like, I wish that the numbers for my study were inverted. Like, I wish that 90% of people showed up to their appointments and that people pursued the treatment that they clearly needed for this, deadly virus. But the fact is, just people don't. And so the solution, right? People say, like, we need to stop this homelessness. We need to solve this homelessness. A lot of people have this idea that somehow we'll be able to get all the homeless off the streets.
Yeah.
But
it's difficult.
It's not going to happen.
It's really if
it's not. I hate to be like a bearer of bad news, but the fact is, you can make giant impacts on this. But the fact is, you're never really going to be able to completely clear the streets unless you pass something like vagrancy laws that existed.
And also, I feel that the community should get involved. Do you think so? Because it's structure around the community. And, if you see a need, I would think someone would help that person or try to. Even you want your city to be cleaned. Okay, you want your city, call your local authority to clean up.
Yeah, they have contractors that work for the city in Skid Row, and they do basically their rounds of the whole Skid Row area. So they'll close off an entire block, like every. They used to do San Pedro Street in a certain area, like every Wednesday. Close down both ends with traffic control. Bring in a couple of cop cars, and then city sanitation workers, and then contractors for a company called, what was it called? Urban Alchemy.
Okay.
And they would come in and they'd clear out all the extra stuff that people had collected. So they clean up a lot of stuff.
Okay. And what about the hygiene? I mean, do they have toilets?
They do. There are programs in Skid Row. There's one called the Refresh Spot that offers shower services 24 hours a day, and I think laundry services.
Oh wow.
So
there is programs out there.
Oh, absolutely.
And you can just tap it. I didn't know they had laundry service.
Yeah, they have everything. Wow. Believe me, people have thought of it. There's a Showers for Hope is another one where they have shower trailers and they travel around. Believe me, they're out there. That's the thing, is people, like, everybody's thought of all this stuff, and there are programs that exist. There's money, there are government grants that exist to fund stuff like this. It's just that it's really underutilized.
So you were there for 2 years, okay? And now you got promoted. I'm going to say self-promotion, or you got promoted because this, to me, inspired, because you were on ground zero and now you got promoted into a different avenue, a different job title or career. Tell me about it.
I'm working in research administration, but I haven't started yet. It starts pretty soon. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I can't really speak much to that because I haven't started yet.
No, but the thing is that what you mentioned to me, the 2 years that you were into that program, can I say ARC program?
Oh, you're talking about, yeah. So, okay.
The ARC program.
Okay, so this is different. That. So, part of my outreach running the hepatitis study was I would go to reentry programs. So reentry programs are what are basically halfway houses, to put it as simply as possible. Yeah. People that have done time in prison and they come out and they're in a semi-controlled environment. There's a very broad spectrum within this space, but we would go to these reentry programs and we had a relationship built with them. Yeah. And so during this time, so I'm pretty tech savvy, I guess you could say,
Software engineer. You're now a software engineer.
I've studied software engineering, although I'm not using it professionally yet.
But you will.
Yeah, it definitely helps get my new job. But so I was going to a lot of these programs, and I was meeting people that had done, 15, 20, 25 years in prison.
Yeah.
And they all had cell phones, and they were all asking me, I was having a conversation with them, and they would all be, hey, how do I do this? How do I da 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 da? Or I was watching them use their phone, and it's just like a train wreck. And I'm just like, hold on, stop, come here. Like, let me show you a couple things. Yeah. So, and it was one after the other, after the other, after the other.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing them, and they're losing their email passwords. They're losing access.
You've seen a need.
Yeah, exactly.
You've seen a need.
Exactly.
And you filled it.
They're getting getting romance scammed, right? Yeah. And all these different things, and it's happening. It's just the same story every time I meet one of these people. Yeah. And I started realizing, okay, nobody is teaching this at all. Mm-hmm. So I cut a long story short. I started asking around, how can I teach this? Mm-hmm. Since I was doing it anyway, one-on-one, like many hours of my time. Yeah. So I approached an organization called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. Mm-hmm. I asked them, hey, I've noticed that nobody teaches this in this space. How do I do that? Mm-hmm. I'm willing to do it. Let's make it happen. Mm-hmm. So long story short, it's happening now, and I'm teaching this. I'm teaching a class right now. It's about 10 people, and collectively they've done about 250 years in prison. Wow. And it's really, I think it is quite possibly the most impactful thing you can teach somebody that has done a serious amount of time in the prison system, because if you think about it, like, a lot of us take it for granted. Our cell phones, we just know already how to use them. Like, we've had these things since they came out. The first one came out in 2008, iPhone. Yeah. Android phones came out in 2008,
I'm still learning.
2009.
I'm still learning.
Believe me, everybody's always all over the place on the spectrum. But the fact is, it's so important.
Yes, it is.
And we don't give people that are re-entering society after these long bids, we don't give them a framework to understand, like, this is not just this cell phone is not just an entertainment device on which you can scroll TikTok and Facebook. Yes, like, this is absolutely integral to your success in this society, knowing how to use this device. So that's what I did. I created a program for it. I teach it on the weekends. It covers everything from, like, basics, hardware versus software, like basics, how the internet works, the icons. Like, people don't know what the paperclip means. Yeah.
See, my shows are basically
much more advanced stuff.
My shows are basically about educational and to teach someone, like what you're doing right now. You're actually bringing to the table a very positive things. Like you said, people are taking for granted, and you're bringing the people from the jail system where they're just like, okay, I have this new phone. What do I do with it? Yeah. I could call. Okay, how do I, and you're there to actually show them and teach them. So you have how many students on a regular basis?
Usually about 10 per class. So the class is, each one is 3 consecutive Saturdays for 4 hours. Wow. And there's about 10 students per class right now.
So you're still on a mission, and you're still giving back.
Yeah. I think it's important.
I think you're doing excellent on what you're doing. Your focus is very well-grounded. And because your passion, it brings what you want to do now. And you're helping people. Even though you ended that 2-year program, you got promoted. And you actually still helping people out. And we need more people like that. Yeah. We need more people like you, because you're bringing positivity to what wasn't positive when they were staying in the jail systems. And I just applaud you for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I also was looking today. I got a news feed, and I came across. I don't know if you know him. It's Tim Tebow.
Okay.
He has a book called Mission Possible.
Okay.
And in some of his words that he expressed in his book, it really it struck me into the heart. Some of the words that he said was, It's basically devotional words I'm going to share with you. It says, focus on what really matters each day. Live accordingly to your goals and values. Remember God's purposes for your sacrifice. Make decisive, impactful choices. Fuel your drive and passion, and that's what you're doing. Set your sights on eternity. So, whatever life whatever life just throws at you, you're never too early or too late to start living a mission possible life every single day. Isn't that something?
It's true.
So you can apply. He just wrote this book. So I'm ready to order this book because it actually impacts the soul and what you're striving for. He's an athlete and he had his hurdles, he had his downfalls, he had his setbacks, and he just pushed forward because his mission was God's purpose for him. So I see when people are doing that, they're actually doing missionary for God. That's my vision. That's what I see in people. When I seen you the first time, I said, "Gosh, he's doing something positive." I meet people on a daily basis, so I'm like, I want to grasp for not their business, but I want to know what they're really about. I want to know them as a person because there is so much to the table, just a facade, an image. But do you really know that person? Really, really know who that person is and what can they do to contribute in a positive aspect for the community, for your fellow man, for your employee, whatever it may be. There should be more people like you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, would you like to say anything before we conclude this show?
I think that if I'm to speak to homelessness, I know that some of the things that I've said make it sound very sort of dismal. I guess you could say, like, oh, it's bad.
Yeah.
The fact is, we can make huge impacts on homelessness. I don't know. I can't really speak to whether or not decriminalizing or further criminalizing drugs will make an impact. It seemed like it hasn't. The drug war didn't work, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to make an impact on homelessness, when somebody homeless asks you for money, don't give them money, but maybe call some of the missions and understand the process about getting an intake. Yeah. And when somebody asks you for something, tell them, hey, do you need a bed? Do you need supportive services? Because I have talked to such and such a mission and I know an intake manager there and I can get you in. Do you need a ride? Yeah. Can I come pick you up tomorrow? Or if you really want to give back something simpler without taking that much effort, go buy them a burger or something, but don't give them money because that's not a good thing. But ultimately, as a society, we can make an impact on homelessness. It's just realize it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that's going to happen because of a talking point of a politician on TV trying to get elected. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Yeah. But if we as a society try to reach out more, we can help a lot of people for sure. Exactly. For sure. And I would like to speak a little bit to the drugs that are happening right now. This is a real thing. I have a good friend of mine, right? A good friend of mine that I grew up with in high school. Him and his wife, they have a 15-year-old daughter. And I talk to my friend's wife almost every day about the state of the world when it comes to this kind of stuff and how it's affecting their kids and stuff like that. Parents, be a good guiding light to your kids, especially as teenagers, as early as 12 years old. Yes. Because pop culture, certain types of music, certain types of pop culture glorify the use of drugs to a level that is really hard for a parent to combat. You have to lead by example. Exactly. And really drive home the point that drugs can lead to them being the person that is pushing a shopping cart down the street. That is a path that happens very frequently with drug use. Besides the fact that almost all pharmaceutical drugs right now that are on the streets are fake, they are pressed with fentanyl. Xanax is being manufactured by the cartels. It looks like Xanax, but it is not Xanax. It's actually fentanyl. Most of these pharmaceutical drugs are fake. They're being manufactured by the cartels. They are also made with fentanyl. Fentanyl is an exceedingly deadly opiate. It's very, very strong. There are variants of fentanyl called fentanyl analogs. There's one called carfentanil that's even 50 times more powerful than fentanyl that is now available on the streets in California. And that's just fentanyl. The methamphetamine now is being manufactured in a completely different way by the cartels. It's causing a lot of impurities to appear within the drug, and it's causing a lot of this mental health stuff.
Yeah.
Be aware of these drugs. Talk to other parents. Do your research. Don't let your teens go to these open parties that are on the internet, that are pushed around on Snapchat. Yeah. It's not like it was when we were back kids
in our days,
where you might have 30 to 50 kids from one school at a party. Now they're publishing these things with hashtags on Snapchat, on Instagram, whatever. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Yeah. The point is, they're having these open parties, and there will be 300 teenagers at these open parties using hard drugs, getting really, really drunk. I mean, it's really not a good thing. It's endemic. Be aware of what your kids are doing. Try to guide them in the right way, because drugs are more dangerous than they have ever been. Be really, really careful.
Like you said, they could end up pushing carts.
It's
being
exactly
homeless.
Right. It's exactly right. Addiction is very real.
Yes. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. I have a couple of numbers, outreach, homeless outreach programs. I have one locally. It's 323-948-0444. That's in the area code of Los Angeles area. There also is a First Day Homeless Shelters. The number is 562-945-4304, and a 1-800 number that you can use. It's 1-800-548-6047. So if we can make an impact on someone today, you can use these numbers. And also, if you want to contact myself, you can call me at 310-906-8122. And we're going to conclude this wonderful educational show. And I thank you, Richard, once again for being here. And I'm proud what you do and your mission.